Hi guys, so I'm here today to do my TBR for the second annual ShelfLove Crate Readathon. So ShelfLove Crate is a subscription box that specialises in young adult science fiction fantasy novels. Yes, all here for that. And they have very kindly asked me to do a TBR video and offered to sponsor it ahead of the Readathon, which takes place from the 13th to the 27th of May, so it is a fortnight long Readathon, which gives you tons of time to read as many books as you can in those 2 weeks. And there are 12 challenges that you can follow along with and try and tick off as you go. Now I have picked out books for each of the 12 challenges, but I will be happy if I read 6 of them during the readathon. Like, I feel like that's my baseline goal. If I read more, fabulous. If I don't, that's okay, as long as I can hit that 6. But I am going to show you the 12 I will be choosing from. Before I jump into my TBR though, I did want to tell you a little bit more about ShelfLove Crate. This is a subscription service for all of you that are fans of anything a little bit magical and like to experience new worlds with the books that they read. So each month's book features a new release book along with some magical goodies that help get you in the mood for that magical world. So those could be mugs, candles, stationery, what have you. And I will be unboxing a special edition ShelfLove Crate box over on my Instagram stories as soon as it comes in, and sharing it with you over on Instagram. So if you don't follow me on Instagram and are interested to see what I receive in my Shelf Crate box, then do check me out at Jean's Thoughts. But without further ado, in the theme of Shelf Love, I'm going to jump into all of the fabulous fantasy and science fiction books on my TBR for this readathon. So challenge number 1 is Written in the Stars, read a book set in space. And for this I am going to be reading the 4th in the Murderbot Diaries series by Martha Wells, which is Exit Strategy. So I have the audiobook for this one saved over on my Scribd account, where you can listen to various different audiobooks during the month, and I have listened to the other 3 on Scribd as well and loved them. They are such good fun. They follow a android in space who does not like interacting with humans. They are a complete introvert and recluse and would much rather sit in their pod all day watching soap operas, but for various reasons gets dragged into the escapades of humans in outer space and often has to save their lives. They are so witty and sarcastic, and I think they're introversion and sort of aversion to company is so relatable. They may not be human, but honestly they're one of the most relatable characters in literature. So I'm really excited to read the 4th and what I think is the final book in the series. So I will be sad that it's over, but I do want to have completed the series, and it is of course set in outer space. Challenge number 2 is inspired by Romance Reboot, and it is read a book with a cyborg. So for this challenge I've decided to go for A Study in Honour by Claire Odell. This is another one I'll be listening to on audiobook over on Scribd, and this is a science fiction futuristic Sherlock Holmes inspired mystery novel where we have a Holmes and Watson character. Although both characters are female, it is of course set in the future in a science fiction world like I mentioned, and if I am not mistaken, Watson has a bionic arm, which I think makes her a cyborg, or at least close enough to fit this prompt. You know how much I love Sherlock Holmes. I love Sherlock Holmes retellings, and all female Sherlock Holmes science fiction retelling I am so here for, and I cannot wait to read this one. And the next challenge is also the last book I have on audiobook, and the rest of them are all physical books. But challenge number 3 is Let the Games Begin, a book containing a trial or tournament, and for this I'm going to go for Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. I have heard so many good things about Maggie Stiefvater and this book in particular from people whose opinions I trust on BookTube, like Huck and Victoria, and I think this is the perfect opportunity to read it. At first I could not think of anything that had a trial or a tournament until I realised that this book involves people racing magical seahorses when these seahorses, I don't know if it's every year or every decade or something, these seahorses come from the sea. Obviously. It reminds me a little bit of Kelpies. I don't know if that's the folklore inspiration behind them, but they are raced and they challenge one another to win against the other one's horse in the race. So that's a tournament, right? Sounds perfect. But challenge number 4 is Unlikely Heroes, a book containing characters from different backgrounds. So I thought a book that both fit different background from me for the characters, but also different backgrounds from each other somewhat, would be a kata warrior. So I haven't picked this one up yet, but I am intending on treating myself to it in the month of May, and it is the sequel to A Kata Witch by Nnedi Okorafor, which is a young adult duology set in Nigeria following witches who are newly discovering their powers. And although the main characters are all of Nigerian descent, some of them have been born or raised in America, whilst others have grown up in Nigeria and they're from different Nigerian tribes. So I think it very actively addressed their different experiences growing up in the first book, so I felt that might carry on into book 2, and I just really want to see what happens with Sunny and her friends in book 2. But challenge number 5 is Life in the Shadows, a book containing an outbreak. This was the one I found the most difficult, and I think the closest I have to that is a book I plan on reading in May anyway. It was a book I was meant to be reading in April, but the buddy read has been postponed to May, and that is Tentacle by Rita Indiana. This is set in a post-apocalyptic Santo Domingo that follows our protagonist who has to travel back in time and prevent the apocalypse and climate change from taking place, and in doing so has to change their gender, I think. So I just assume, because it's set in a post-apocalyptic, post-climate disaster era, it might contain some sort of outbreaks, or at least there's been an outbreak of apocalypse. I don't know. It was the closest I could come to. It's certainly within that kind of science fiction genre that I think the challenge is nodding towards, so hopefully this meets that criteria. We then have Magic and Mischief, a book with magical creatures, and for that I want to read Skin by Ilka Tamke. This book contains shapeshifters, so I'm pretty sure that ticks the box for magical creatures. It's actually set in Roman Britain, which I think is such a fascinating setting. It is a fantasy book, like I mentioned, because there are shapeshifters in it, but it has a historical setting of Roman Britain, which is a time period I'd love to read more fantasy books set in, because I am an ancient historian. And our protagonist in this book is one of the only people that anybody from Britain knows who cannot shapeshift. So she is absent of what other people call a skin. So the skin is the animal that you can change into, where she is skinless because she cannot change into anything. But presumably she will have a major role to play in saving herself or her people or someone else, and perhaps discover some of her own abilities or powers that she didn't know she had. I'll be very intrigued to find out. We then have Sibling Rivalries, a book containing sisters, and for that I have The Girl King, Two Sisters, One Crown by Mimi Yu. Perfect subheading, I think, for this challenge. This book is about two sisters whose father is the emperor, and his oldest daughter should inherit from him, but he has decided he doesn't want a woman to inherit the empire from him and has instead chosen a man to be his heir. So these two sisters decide to fight for what is rightfully theirs. The obviously elder sister with the stance that she's the eldest and she should have that throne, and the younger sister has to decide whether she wants to support her sister or fight for the throne for herself. Sounds very, very interesting. We then have Feats of Illusion, a book containing a character with untapped potential. This book could have actually been in the previous challenge as well, because it does contain sisters, but I think it fits this challenge. It's difficult to tell whether somebody has untapped potential before you've read a book, but I think that this will, and that is The Orphanage of Gods by Helena Kogan. This book is set in a world where there was a revolution and the gods were overthrown, and all of their children who are potentially going to show godlike powers, I don't know if they are half mortal or fully immortal children, are kept in the orphanage of the gods, and as soon as they start to show inklings of power are taken away and never seen again. So our protagonist is one of these young people who is the child of a god, and she potentially is going to show some sort of power and has to save her people. So that sounds like untapped potential to me. Challenge number 9 is Squad Goals, a book containing multiple points of view. For this I'm going to read The Rose and the Dagger, which is the sequel to The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ade, and The Wrath and the Dawn contained multiple perspectives, so I'm assuming that this too will contain multiple perspectives, because that usually continues on in series. But the book itself, or at least the first book, is predominantly inspired by 1001 Arabian Nights, with sort of interweaving other fairy tales in there, and it is about a young girl named Shazi who has decided to volunteer to be the bride of this prince who kills his brides every morning after marrying them the night before, and it has been, you know, like 70 odd days in a row where he has done this, and 70 odd brides have died, and she has a plan for revenge because she has lost friends to this prince, so volunteers herself. But we are also reading from the perspective in particular of her betrothed prior to her marrying this prince, so we get multiple points of view. We then have Warrior Women, a book featuring Vikings, and for this challenge I'm actually planning on reading the book that ShelfLove Crate are sending me in my subscription box. So as soon as that arrives I will have my copy, and that is The Warrior of the Wild, which is a Viking inspired fantasy novel about a girl who is supposed to take part in this trial that everyone from her village takes part in, but when she fails it, her father banishes her from their home into the wilderness, which is full of monsters, and she has to you know, take care of herself, I guess, and fun fantasy things happen. It sounds really fun. I cannot wait to receive my copy along with whatever goodies it is going to be coming with in my ShelfLove Crate box, which I, of course, like I mentioned, will be sharing with you over on Instagram, so do look out for that. But there are 2 more challenges, and the next one is Take Back the Throne, a book featuring royalty, and for this one I had to go for a book that had something royal in the title, and that is The Star-Touched Queen. So this is by Roshana Chokshi, and this is about a woman who is married off in an arranged marriage of political convenience, whilst she is much more drawn to scholarly pursuits and never wanted to potentially be married, and certainly not under these circumstances, and through this marriage becomes queen of her own kingdom. And it sounds brilliant. I've heard a lot of great things about this author's writing, so I'm looking forward to picking this one up. And then the final challenge is Saints and Sinners, a book with star-crossed lovers, and for that I've decided to also go for a sequel, and that is Turning the Storm by Naomi Kritzer. This is the sequel to The Fires of the Faithful, which is a fancy novel that has the beginnings of a romance between 2 female characters in it. So it does feature a queer romance involving the protagonist. However, they do not spend the majority of the book exploring this romance or even with one another. And although I really appreciated that in the first book the fact that she was gay was something that was there without it being a romance book, I believe in this sequel we will get to see the development of their relationship far more, and them reuniting with one another and struggling to find compatibility with their very different backgrounds. So I thought that they fitted well with the star-crossed lovers themes, because they are certainly not meant to be together in this world. But those are the books that I am planning on reading during the ShelfLove Crate Readathon. I would love if you would participate alongside me. Do look out on my Twitter and Instagram, where I'll be sharing my updates during the Readathon, as well as over on ShelfLove Crate's Instagram and Twitter at ShelfLove Crate, where they will obviously be sharing more about the challenges and getting you involved in various different reading activities. And of course check out their subscription box over on their website, which is the inspiration behind this entire Readathon. But I'm really looking forward to participating in a fortnight-long Readathon, because actually I have only ever participated in Readathons that have been sort of over the course of a weekend, a week, or maybe 9 days, just over a week. I've never done a fortnight-long readathon before, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun because I can hopefully get a lot of reading done in that time. So do let me know if you are planning on participating, what books you might be reading for the challenges, and if you have any thoughts on the books I've mentioned in this video. Thanks again to ShelfLove Crate for sponsoring this video, and I will see you all again soon. Bye guys!